close your eyes. Let the last light fade from the windows. Let the shadows creep across the floor, pooling in the corners, reaching for you with fingers made of darkness. Let your breathing slow. Let the world outside grow quiet. I'm going to tell you a story you think you know, a story about a girl and a wolf and a grandmother in the woods, a story about danger and rescue and learning important lessons about strangers. You know this one, don't you? You've known it since you were small. The little girl in the red cape, skipping through the forest with a basket of goodies. The big bad wolf who tricks her. What big eyes you have, grandmother. What big teeth you have. The friendly woodsman who saves the day, cutting open the wolf's belly, and everyone lives happily ever after except the wolf, who probably deserved it anyway. It's a simple story, a safe story, the kind of story that teaches children not to talk to strangers, not to wander off the path, to be careful in the world because there are dangers out there. But don't worry, adults will protect you, everything will be fine. It's the kind of story we tell children to make them cautious without making them terrified. But you're not a child anymore, are you? And the story, the real story, the old story, the one they told before we decided that children needed protection from the truth, that story is different. That story doesn't have a friendly woodsman who just happens to show up at the right moment. It has a huntsman who's been tracking a killer, a predator who has murdered before and will murder again. That story doesn't end with, "and everyone was fine." It ends with a girl climbing out of a wolf's stomach covered in digestive acid, traumatized and transformed, learning that the world is full of teeth and you can't always stay on the path. That story has a sequel, a second wolf. And the second time, no one saves the girl, she saves herself. That story is about what it really means to survive. So let me tell you that story instead. The real one. The one the brothers Grimm collected from German grandmothers who understood that warnings need teeth to be effective. The one that survived for hundreds of years because it had something important to say about predators and prey and what happens when you trust the wrong smile. Let me tell you about Rotkäppchen. That was her name, you know. Not Red Riding Hood. That's English. Prettified, gentled. Her real name was Rotkäppchen, literally little red cap in German. Not a cape, not a hood, a cap. A small red cap that her grandmother made for her, that marked her as loved, as precious, as visible, as prey. Are you comfortable? Good. Then settle in, pull the blankets close, and listen. Because this story begins not with a wolf, but with a choice. A choice a mother makes, knowing it might kill her daughter. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. The girl's name is never given in the story. She's just Little Red Cap. That's all we get. No name, no age specified, no history beyond what we can infer. She's every girl, every daughter, every young person standing at the edge of the forest, being told to walk into danger alone because there's no other choice. She lived in a village at the edge of the woods. This was Germany, hundreds of years ago, when the forests were old and thick and dangerous. When wolves were real threats, not metaphorical, not symbolic, but actual predators who took livestock and sometimes, when they were hungry enough and bold enough, took children. The villagers lived in fear of the deep woods. Everyone had lost someone to the forest. A brother who went hunting, a sister who went to gather mushrooms, an aunt who lived alone in a cottage and was found one spring, just bones in a nightgown. The woods were dangerous. Everyone knew that. The children were told from the time they could walk, stay on the path, never leave the path. The path is safety. The path is civilization. Everything else is teeth and darkness and death. Little Redcap knew this. She'd grown up hearing the warnings, seeing the fear in her mother's eyes whenever anyone mentioned the deep woods. But her grandmother lived there, deep in the forest, in a cottage by an old oak tree, a mile from the village, maybe more. Far enough that you couldn't see her house from the village edge, far enough that screams wouldn't carry. The old woman was too frail now to make the walk to town, too weak to manage on her own. She lived alone with her memories and her solitude and her prayers that wolves would stay away. And when she got sick, when the fever came and the cough started, someone had to go check on her. Someone had to bring food, medicine, care. The girl's mother stood in their cottage doorway that morning, looking out at the forest. She was holding a basket she'd packed with cake and wine, medicine for the sick, comfort for the dying. She looked at her daughter, 12 years old, maybe, 13 at most, small for her age, quick and clever and trusting, so terribly, dangerously trusting. "I need you to take this to your grandmother," her mother said. The girl looked at the forest, the dark trees, the narrow path disappearing into shadow. "Alone?" she asked. Her mother's face was tight with fear and guilt and terrible necessity. "Your father is away trading. Your brothers are in the fields. There's no one else. And your grandmother is very sick. If someone doesn't bring her food, doesn't check on her..." She didn't finish. She didn't need to. They both knew how it ended. The girl nodded, took the basket, pulled her red cap tight on her head. Her mother grabbed her shoulders, held her close, looked into her eyes with an intensity that was almost frightening. "Listen to me," she said. "Stay on the path. Do you understand? Do not leave the path. Do not stop. Do not talk to anyone. Walk straight to your grandmother's house. Give her the basket. Come straight home. Promise me." "I promise," the girl said. Her mother held her a moment longer, then let her go, watched her walk toward the trees, watched the red cap bob along the path until the forest swallowed it whole, and stood there in the doorway, staring at the place where her daughter had disappeared, whispering prayers she wasn't sure anyone was listening to. The forest was darker than Little Red Cap remembered. She'd walked this path before, of course, many times when she was younger, when her mother or father would accompany her. But never alone, never like this, with the basket heavy on her arm and her mother's warnings ringing in her ears. "Stay on the path. Don't talk to anyone. Go straight there and come straight home." The trees pressed close on either side. Old oaks, their trunks wider than a man could wrap his arms around, their branches intertwining overhead to form a canopy so thick that even midday felt like dusk. The path was narrow, barely more than a deer trail worn into the moss and fallen leaves. It was quiet, too quiet. The birds that should have been singing were silent. The usual rustling of small animals in the undergrowth had stopped. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. Little Redcap walked faster, her heart beginning to pound. She told herself she was being foolish. It was just the woods, just trees, nothing to be afraid of. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She'd been walking for perhaps half an hour. The village was long out of sight behind her, grandmother's cottage still, perhaps 20 minutes ahead, when she met the wolf. He stepped out of the trees ahead of her, blocking the path. Little Redcap stopped, her breath caught in her throat. Her hands tightened on the basket handle. The wolf was enormous, bigger than any wolf she'd seen from a distance, bigger than the hunting dogs in the village, bigger than seemed possible. His fur was dark, almost black in the shadows, shot through with grey at the muzzle and chest. His paws were massive, and when he looked at her, his eyes were yellow and bright and far too intelligent. He was looking at her the way her father looked at deer before loosing an arrow. "Good day, little Redcap," the wolf said. The girl's mind went blank. Not at the sight of him. She'd expected there might be wolves, but at the fact that he was speaking, that his voice was smooth and pleasant, that he knew her name, that he was smiling at her with a mouth full of teeth. "Where are you going, all alone in the woods?" the wolf asked, tilting his head with what seemed like genuine curiosity. "Doesn't your mother know it's dangerous out here? A small girl like you, wandering by herself. Anything could happen. The girl should have run. Every instinct was screaming at her to run. But she was 12 years old, 13 at most, raised to be polite to adults, to answer when spoken to be helpful and kind. And the wolf sounded so friendly, so concerned, so safe. "I'm going to my grandmother's house," she heard herself say. "She's sick. I'm bringing her cake and wine." "How kind you are," the wolf said, taking a step closer. "What a good granddaughter. And where does your grandmother live? Is it far?" The girl pointed down the path. "About 20 minutes' walk, in the clearing by the old oak tree. She lives alone in a little cottage." "All alone?" The wolf's smile widened. "How lonely for her. And how brave of you to visit. But tell me, are you in a very great hurry?" The girl blinked. My mother said to go straight there." Of course," the wolf said smoothly. "But you've been walking so quickly, so seriously. Look around you. Look at how beautiful the forest is, the flowers, the birds, the sunshine coming through the leaves. Your grandmother would surely love a bouquet of flowers with her cake and wine. What a thoughtful gift that would be. What a loving gesture." The girl looked around. The wolf was right. There were flowers growing just off the path, beautiful ones, blue and yellow and white, nodding in the dappled sunlight. "I don't know," she said slowly. "My mother said not to leave the path." "Just for a moment," the wolf said. His voice was soothing, persuasive, like honey. "Just to gather a few flowers. You can see them from here, you won't get lost, and think how happy it would make your grandmother. A sick old woman, all alone in the woods, receiving not just food, but beauty. Wouldn't that cheer her? Wouldn't that show her how much you love her?" The girl hesitated. "Stay on the path," her mother had said. "Don't stop." But flowers would be nice. Grandmother loved flowers, and they were right there, just a few steps away. "I suppose," the girl said finally. "Just a few wouldn't hurt." "Of course not," the wolf agreed, his smile showing more teeth now. "What could possibly go wrong?" He watched as the girl stepped off the path and into the undergrowth. Watched her move deeper into the trees, chasing butterflies, picking flowers, losing track of time, losing track of the path. And then he turned and ran, not away from her, toward her destination. He moved fast through the forest, taking shortcuts, leaping over fallen logs, splashing through streams, moving with purpose and hunger and terrible certainty. Because while the girl was gathering flowers, wandering farther and farther from safety, The wolf was taking the direct route to grandmother's house. The tender young thing would keep, he thought. She'd take her time with those flowers. She was foolish enough, trusting enough. But first, the old woman. First, the appetizer. Then he'd come back for the main course. The cottage sat in a clearing surrounded by old oak trees, smoke rising from its chimney, exactly where the girl had said it would be. The wolf circled it once, evaluating. Small building, one room probably, a door, 2 windows, a chimney. The old woman was home, alone, weak, sick, perfect. He approached the door, knocked, a strangely civilized gesture for a predator, but he was enjoying this. The game, the deception. From inside, "Who is it?" The wolf pitched his voice higher, younger, sweeter, mimicking the girl's tone as best he could. "It's Little Red Cap, grandmother. I've brought you cake and wine. Open the door." A pause. The wolf could hear movement inside. Slow, shuffling footsteps. The old woman was coming to the door, weak and unsuspecting. "The latch is broken, child," came the quavering voice. "Just lift it and come in." The wolf smiled, lifted the latch, opened the door, stepped inside. The grandmother was standing by the fireplace, one hand on the mantel for support. She was old, 70, maybe older, thin and frail, her white hair in a long braid, her face lined with age and illness. She was wearing a nightgown and cap, had clearly been in bed when the knock came. She looked at the wolf. The wolf looked at her. For one long, frozen moment, neither moved. Then the grandmother opened her mouth to scream. The wolf was faster. He crossed the room in 2 bounds, massive and terrifyingly quick. His jaws closed around her before the scream could fully form, before she could run, before she could fight. She tried. The old woman tried. Her fists beat against his head, weak as rain. Her nails scratched at his muzzle, leaving thin red lines. She kicked and thrashed and fought with every ounce of strength left in her failing body. It wasn't enough. The wolf's throat worked. Once, twice, 3 times. And the grandmother slid down into darkness, into heat, into the crushing, wet compression of the wolf's gullet. Down, down into the stomach. She was still alive, still conscious, trapped in the dark, in the acid that was already beginning to burn, trapped in the knowledge that she was being digested alive, that there was no escape, that her granddaughter was walking into the same trap. The wolf stood in the middle of the cottage, breathing hard, his belly already distended. He licked his chops, looked around the room, the bed in the corner, the nightgown and cap the grandmother had been wearing. They'd come off when he swallowed her. He had an idea. It took some doing. Paws weren't made for this kind of work. But he managed to pull on the nightgown. It was tight across his massive chest, but in dim light, with desperation making you see what you wanted to see, it might work. He positioned the nightcap on his head, tucking his ears underneath as best he could. He climbed into the bed, pulled the covers up to his chin, drew the curtains partially so the room was dimmer, and waited. Inside his belly, the grandmother was trying to scream, but there was no air, no sound, just the crushing dark and the burning acid and the terrible knowledge that her granddaughter was coming, that the wolf would take her too. Outside, footsteps on the path, getting closer. The wolf smiled in the darkness of the cottage and settled deeper into the bed, making himself as small as possible, as human as possible, waiting for dessert. Little Redcap was lost. She'd been picking flowers for what felt like hours, though it was probably less than that. Time had a strange way of stretching in the forest. And when she finally looked up with her arms full of blooms, she couldn't see the path anymore. Panic seized her, cold and sharp and paralyzing. "Stay on the path," her mother had said. "Never leave the path." But she had left it, and now she couldn't find it. The trees all looked the same. The undergrowth was thick in every direction. She spun in a circle, trying to orient herself, trying to remember which way she'd come. She was lost in the woods, and the wolf was somewhere out there, and she was going to die here, wasn't she? They'd find her bones in the spring, picked clean, just another child who didn't listen. Wait, there, through the trees, a break in the canopy, a clearing. She ran toward it, clutching her basket and flowers, her red cap snagging on branches, her breath coming in short gasps. The cottage, grandmother's cottage, right where it should be. Relief flooded through her so intense it made her dizzy. She'd made it. She was safe. Everything was fine. The door was ajar. That was wrong. Grandmother never left the door open. She was too careful, too aware of what lived in the woods, too frightened of wolves. Little Red Cap pushed the door open slowly. "Grandmother, I've brought you cake and wine, and flowers. I picked them for you." The cottage was dim. The curtains were drawn. The fire was burning low, filling the room with smoke and shadows. And in the bed in the corner, a shape lay under the covers. "Come in, dear child," said a voice from the bed. Grandmother's voice, but wrong somehow, hoarse, strained, too deep. "Close the door. Come to the bed. I'm too weak to get up." Little Red Cap stepped inside, closed the door behind her. The click of the latch sounded very loud in the quiet cottage. She walked toward the bed, her eyes adjusting slowly to the dim light. Something was wrong. She couldn't say what exactly, but something wasn't right. The figure under the covers was too large. And the smell. The cottage didn't smell like it usually did, like herbs and wood smoke and the lavender sachets grandmother kept everywhere. It smelled like something else, something animal, something wild. But it was grandmother. Had to be grandmother. Who else would it be? "I brought you flowers," Little Red Cap said, her voice small in the darkness. "The wolf said you'd like flowers." "The wolf?" The voice from the bed was suddenly sharper, more alert. "I met him on the path. He was very nice. He suggested I pick flowers for you." A sound from the bed, almost like laughter, almost like growling. "How kind of him. Come closer, child. Let me see you." Little Red Cap approached the bed, stood beside it, her heart starting to beat faster. Something was very, very wrong. The nightcap was pulled low. The blankets were pulled high. But even in the dim light, she could see that the face on the pillow was wrong. The features were wrong. The shape was wrong. "Grandmother," she said slowly, her voice shaking now. "What big ears you have." "The better to hear you with, my dear," said the thing in the bed. Little Red Cap took a step back. The flowers fell from her hands. "Grandmother, what big eyes you have." "The better to see you with, my dear." Another step back, her hand reaching for the door latch behind her. "Grandmother, what big hands you have." "The better to grab you with, my dear." The thing in the bed was sitting up now, the nightcap falling back, the blanket sliding down, yellow eyes gleaming in the shadows. Little Red Cap's hand found the latch. Her whole body was shaking. "Grandmother," she whispered, "what big teeth you have." The wolf threw off the covers, rose from the bed, towered over her, massive and terrible, his jaw unhinging to show rows of teeth designed for tearing meat. "The better to eat you with," Little Red Cap screamed. She tried to turn, tried to open the door, tried to run. She wasn't fast enough. The wolf's jaws closed around her like a trap. She had time for one more scream, cut short, agonized, before she was sliding down the same dark passage her grandmother had taken. Down, down into crushing heat and airless dark, down into her grandmother's arms. They found each other in the darkness, grandmother and granddaughter, both alive, impossibly, both trapped in the wolf's belly, the acid burning their skin, the pressure crushing their ribs. They couldn't speak. There was no air, but they held each other as tightly as the confined space would allow. This was how they would die, together in the dark, digested alive. Above them, the wolf sighed with satisfaction. His belly was so full now, so heavy. Both the old woman and the young girl, exactly as he'd planned. The deception had worked perfectly. He felt drowsy, gorged, content. He waddled back to the bed. Walking was difficult with such a distended stomach, and lay down, pulled the covers over himself out of habit, though he didn't need them, and closed his eyes. Within minutes, he was snoring, deep, rattling snores that shook his whole body. The cottage fell silent except for that terrible sound, and in the wolf's belly, grandmother and granddaughter wept without tears and waited for the end. Wilhelm had been tracking this wolf for 3 weeks. It had started with livestock, a sheep from the Müller farm, its throat torn out, most of the carcass dragged into the woods, then 2 more from the Schmidt place, then a hunting dog, a big mean dog that should have been able to defend itself, found dead and half-eaten near the tree line. The wolf was getting bolder, getting hungrier. And Wilhelm knew what came next. Children. That's what wolves did when they lost their fear of humans, when they got a taste for easy prey. When sheep and dogs weren't enough anymore, they started taking children. So Wilhelm had been tracking it, following the signs, the tracks, massive paw prints, bigger than any wolf should leave, the scat, full of bone fragments and fur, the territorial markings on trees, the kills, learning its patterns, learning its territory, and today, the trail led here. To the old woman's cottage in the clearing by the oak trees. Wilhelm approached cautiously, his rifle loaded and ready. The door was closed, smoke from the chimney. But something felt wrong. The forest was too quiet, no birds, no squirrels, just silence and the smell of predator. He tried the door. It opened easily. The latch wasn't properly secured. He stepped inside. The cottage was dim and close and smelled strongly of animal. And there, on the bed, an enormous wolf lay sleeping. Its belly was grotesquely swollen, distended like it had swallowed something huge, something that shouldn't fit. Wilhelm raised his rifle, aimed at the wolf's head. His finger tightened on the trigger. One shot, and it would be over. The livestock would be safe. The children would be safe. He'd collect the bounty and be celebrated as a hero. And then the wolf's belly moved, not breathing. This was different. A push from inside, as if something in there was fighting, struggling, trying to get out. Wilhelm lowered the rifle, stared at the swollen stomach. "Jesus," he whispered. "Jesus Christ." The old woman, she lived here alone. If the wolf had gotten her. And there was supposed to be a girl, the old woman's granddaughter. People in the village had mentioned she was coming to visit today. If they were both in there, if they were still alive. It was a gamble, a terrible gamble. If he killed the wolf now, cleanly, that would be the end of it. But if there was any chance, any possibility, Wilhelm set down his rifle, took out his hunting knife. The blade was sharp. He'd honed it that morning. He approached the sleeping wolf and began to cut. The blade sliced through fur and skin. Blood welled up, but not as much as he'd expected. The wolf's blood pressure was low from the gorged sleep. The wolf stirred, groaned, but didn't wake. Wilhelm cut carefully, a long incision down the belly, trying not to go too deep, trying not to puncture anything vital. He pulled the incision open with his hands and saw red, a red cap. He cut faster now, pulling the flesh apart, and a small hand thrust through the opening. Then another, then a young girl was climbing out of the wolf's stomach, gasping and shaking and covered in blood and digestive fluid. "It was so dark," she whispered, her voice raw from screaming. "It was so dark in there." "Get back," Wilhelm told her. "There's someone else." He reached into the wound, found another shape, smaller, frailer, and pulled. The grandmother came next, old and weak, and somehow still alive, being born backwards out of death. Both women collapsed on the floor, gasping and weeping and alive. The wolf was waking now, feeling the pain, feeling the violation, beginning to thrash and snarl. "We need to finish this," Wilhelm said, reaching for his rifle. But Little Redcap stopped him. "Wait," she said. Her voice was different, harder. Something had changed in the dark of the wolf's belly. Some innocence had been digested away, leaving something colder and sharper behind. She went outside, came back with an armful of stones from the garden wall. Heavy stones, sharp-edged stones, enough to fill a wolf's belly. "Help me," she said. Wilhelm understood. Together, they began cramming stones into the wound in the wolf's belly, into the empty space where grandmother and granddaughter had been, packing it tight with rock. Heavy, unforgiving, deadly rock. The grandmother watched from the floor, too weak to help, but her eyes were bright and sharp and satisfied. When the cavity was full, when the wolf's belly was packed as tight as it had been before, but with stone instead of flesh, Wilhelm took needle and thread from the grandmother's sewing basket and sewed the wound shut. The wolf slept on, too deeply gorged, too traumatized by the violation to fully wake. When the stitching was done, they stepped back and waited. It took perhaps 20 minutes. The wolf began to stir, to shift, to wake from his unnatural sleep. He tried to stand, couldn't. The weight in his belly was too much. He collapsed back onto the bed with a pained whimper. He tried again, managed to roll off the bed onto the floor, tried to walk, took 3 staggering steps towards the door before his legs gave out. The stones were shifting inside him, grinding, crushing, breaking things that shouldn't be broken. "Water," the wolf gasped, his voice no longer smooth or charming or human-like, just an animal's desperate plea. Need water. So thirsty. He dragged himself toward the door, inch by inch, the stones crushing his organs with every movement. Little Red Cap watched from the corner, her face blank, her red cap still on her head, stained now with blood and worse things. The wolf made it to the threshold. Freedom was right there, the forest, water, safety. He died on the doorstep, crushed from the inside by the weight of his own greed. Wilhelm skinned him, took the pelt for the bounty. The grandmother took the stones, washed them, put them back in her garden wall where they belonged. Little Red Cap took nothing. She sat in the corner of the cottage, wrapped in a blanket her grandmother had given her, staring at the wall. "You're safe now," Wilhelm kept saying. "It's over. You're safe." But Little Red Cap didn't feel safe. She felt like she'd died in the dark and come back wrong, like something had been left behind in the wolf's belly, something innocent, something soft. And what climbed out wasn't quite the same girl who'd gone in. The grandmother fed her cake and wine, the food she'd brought, but Little Red Cap could barely taste it. "I'll walk you home," Wilhelm offered. "No," Little Red Cap said. "I know the way." She walked home alone, through the forest. As the sun set and the shadows grew long, she stayed on the path. When she got home, her mother screamed and hugged her and wept and thanked God she was alive. "I'm fine," Little Red Cap told her. "I'm fine. Grandmother is fine. The wolf is dead." Her mother held her so tight it hurt. "I shouldn't have sent you. I should never have sent you alone. I'm so sorry. It's fine," Little Red Cap said again. "It's over." But that night, lying in her bed, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in the dark, in the heat, in the crushing pressure of the wolf's belly, her grandmother's arms around her, both of them waiting to die. She couldn't stop thinking about the wolf on the path. How nice he'd seemed, how friendly, how concerned for her welfare, how she told him everything, where she was going, who she was visiting, how to get there, how she'd practically drawn him a map to her own death. And the worst part, the part that made her lie awake shaking, was that she'd wanted to trust him. She'd wanted to believe he was safe. Because if you couldn't trust someone who seemed kind, who seemed helpful, who seemed to care, then who could you trust? The answer, she was learning, was no one. Not really. Not when it mattered. If she wanted to survive in this world, she'd have to learn to save herself, because no one else would. 3 weeks passed. The bruises faded, the scratches healed, the burn marks from the acid on her skin turned to scars, and then to faint marks, and then to nothing visible. Everyone except Little Red Cap decided things were back to normal. Her mother decided the girl needed to visit her grandmother again. "She's alone out there," her mother said, packing another basket. More cake, more wine, as if the first trip had been nothing more than an unfortunate incident, easily forgotten. "She needs company. She needs family." Little Red Cap looked at the basket, at the path leading into the woods, at the red cap hanging by the door, washed clean now, no trace of blood or wolf stomach remaining. "I don't want to go," she said. Her mother's face tightened. "Don't be difficult. You've done it before. The wolf is dead. There's nothing to be afraid of anymore." Little Red Cap wanted to scream, wanted to say, "There are always more wolves. The forest is full of them. You're sending me into danger again because it's convenient, because there's no one else, because my fear matters less than grandmother's loneliness." But she didn't say any of that. She took the basket, put on the red cap, walked into the woods. This time, she didn't dawdle, didn't pick flowers, didn't leave the path even for a moment. She walked fast, head down, watching the shadows, and that's why she saw him, the second wolf. He stepped out of the trees ahead of her, blocking the path, just like the first one had. Smaller than the first wolf, younger, but just as hungry, just as dangerous. "Good day, Little Red Cap," the wolf said, smiling. "Where are you?" Little Red Cap didn't let him finish. She ran, not away from him, past him, dodging to the side, slipping by while he was still talking, still trying to charm her, still expecting her to be the polite, trusting girl who would stop and chat and tell him everything he wanted to know. She was not that girl anymore. She ran down the path toward grandmother's cottage, her feet pounding, her breath burning in her lungs. Behind her, the wolf recovered from his surprise, snarled, gave chase. But Little Red Cap had a head start, and she was motivated by something stronger than hunger. She was motivated by rage. She burst into her grandmother's cottage, slammed the door, dropped the basket. "He's coming," she gasped. The grandmother, recovered now, stronger, harder than she'd been before, nearly being digested alive, looked at her granddaughter, saw something new in the girl's eyes, something that hadn't been there before, something dangerous. "Then we'll be ready," the grandmother said. They'd been preparing, had talked about this, about what they would do if another wolf came, about how they wouldn't be victims again, about how they would fight. The grandmother had been making sausages. The cottage smelled of cooking meat, the scent wafting out the chimney into the forest. She had a huge pot of water boiling over the fire, and beneath the chimney, just outside, she'd positioned a large stone trough, the kind used for watering livestock. She'd filled it that morning, with all the boiling water from cooking. "Open the window," the grandmother said, "the one by the chimney." Little Red Cap opened it. The wolf was circling the cottage now, snarling, trying to find a way in. The door was barred. The windows were too small, but he could smell the sausages, could smell the meat cooking. He was so hungry. There was a tree close to the cottage, close enough to climb, close enough to jump from onto the roof. The wolf climbed it, moving with the desperate hunger of a predator who'd found prey and wouldn't be denied. Inside, grandmother and granddaughter waited. The wolf landed on the thatched roof with a thump. They could hear him moving around up there, trying to find the chimney, following the scent of cooking meat. "The tiles by the chimney are loose," the grandmother whispered. "I oiled them this morning." They watched through the window as the wolf climbed higher on the roof, following the smell. He reached the loose tiles around the chimney. His weight shifted them. They slipped. He fell. The wolf had time for one surprised yelp before he plunged into the trough of boiling water beneath the chimney. The trough was deep, deeper than it looked, and the water was still near boiling, scalding hot. The wolf landed in it with a splash. The water closed over his head. He thrashed, screamed, tried to jump out, couldn't. The trough was too deep, the sides too smooth. His paws couldn't find purchase on the wet stone. Every movement just made him sink deeper into the boiling water. His screams were terrible, high and agonized and increasingly weak. Little Red Cap and her grandmother watched from the window, watched the wolf die in the water they had prepared for him, watched him realize, in his final moments, that this time the prey had been waiting, that this time there would be no rescue for him, no mercy, no escape, just hot water and death and two women who remembered. The thrashing stopped. The screaming stopped. The wolf's body floated in the trough, scalded and dead. Little Red Cap felt something she couldn't quite name. Not joy exactly, not satisfaction, but something close, something that felt like justice and revenge and survival all mixed together. The grandmother looked at her granddaughter. "We did that," she said quietly. "Not a huntsman, not a man, us." Little Red Cap nodded. "We did. We saved ourselves." "We saved ourselves," Little Red Cap agreed. They dragged the wolf's body into the woods later. Let the scavengers have it. No pelt this time, no trophy, just disposal. They cleaned the trough, drained the water, made fresh tea, and sat together in the cottage, grandmother and granddaughter, survivors, no longer waiting for rescue that might not come. "There will be more," the grandmother said after a while. "Not wolves, maybe, but predators. People who see weakness and try to exploit it. People who smile and seem kind and turn out to be monsters." "I know," Little Red Cap said. "But now you know something else." "What?" "That you can fight back, that you're not helpless, that being prey doesn't mean staying prey." Little Red Cap touched her red cap, the cap that made her visible, the cap that her grandmother had made to keep her safe, to help her be found. It had made her easy to hunt, easy to track, easy to target. But she didn't take it off. She would keep wearing it, but now it would mean something different. Not, "Here I am, vulnerable and easy," but "Here I am, and I survived, and I remember, and I'm waiting." The wolves could come. She would be ready. Let's talk about what this story really means. Because it's not actually about wolves, is it? It's about predators. Every predator who ever seemed kind, seemed trustworthy, seemed safe right up until they weren't. The wolf on the path who asks questions and makes suggestions. That's every adult who's ever groomed a child, who's built trust through kindness and interest, who's used that trust as a weapon. "Where are you going?" "What a good girl you are. Let me help you." That's grooming, building vulnerability, getting the victim to provide the information they need, to go where they want them to go, to lower their defenses. And Little Red Cap tells him everything. Where she's going, who she's visiting, how to get there. She gives him directions to her grandmother's house, a timeline, everything he needs, and we blame her for that. In the moralized versions, we say, "See what happens when you talk to strangers," as if it's her fault for being polite, for being kind, for answering when spoken to, all the things we teach children to be. But the wolf is using her good qualities against her, using her socialization against her. That's what predators do. They don't announce themselves. They're charming, persuasive. They seem safe. The wolf in grandmother's clothing is every predator who hides in plain sight, who wears a mask of normalcy, who looks like someone trustworthy. What big eyes you have. The moment you start to notice something's wrong, but you tell yourself you're being paranoid, surely everything is fine. What big teeth you have. The moment you know. When you can't deny it anymore. When you realize you're in danger. But by then it's too late. You're already in the room. The door is already closed. The wolf is already between you and escape. And then you're swallowed. Being swallowed whole. Trapped in the dark. Waiting to be digested. That's trauma. That feeling of being consumed by something terrible, of being trapped inside the worst moment of your life, of reliving it over and over in the dark while everyone outside thinks you're fine. Little Redcap climbs out of the wolf covered in acid and blood. She survives. Everyone celebrates. The danger is over. But she's not the same. That's the part the sanitized versions don't tell you. They end with rescue. They don't show you the girl lying awake at night, unable to close her eyes without feeling the darkness closing in. They don't show you the hypervigilance, the fear, the way every shadow looks like a wolf now. Trauma doesn't end when the danger ends. Survival isn't the same as being okay. And the second wolf, that's the cruelest part. Because there's always a second wolf. You survive one predator, one trauma, one terrible thing, and the world sends another. The dangers don't stop, the wolves don't stop hunting, and everyone expects you to just be fine. To just keep walking through the woods with your basket as if nearly dying wasn't a life-changing event. But the second time, Little Redcap doesn't wait to be saved. She runs. She prepares. She and her grandmother, 2 women, 2 survivors, they make a plan. They save themselves. They kill the wolf, deliberately, and they watch him die. Is that revenge? Justice? Just survival? All of the above. And the story says, that's okay. It's okay to fight back. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to want your attacker dead. It's okay to feel satisfaction when they suffer. The sanitized versions don't tell you that. They say, wait for rescue. Be passive. Adults will save you. But the old version, the version told by women who knew that rescue doesn't always come, that version says, save yourself. Be angry. Be dangerous. Survive. The path is rules and safety and doing what you're told. But the world demands we leave the path, that we trust people, that we take risks. And predators know this. They use it. Just step off the path for a moment. Just pick flowers. Just be kind. So what do? Stay on the path and never really live? Or leave it and risk the wolves? There's no good answer. That's what makes this story so powerful. Little Redcap follows the rules and gets eaten anyway. Leaves the path and gets eaten. There's no perfect formula for safety. Sometimes the wolves get you no matter what you do. And sometimes you survive not because you did everything right, but because you got lucky. Because someone happened to walk by. Because you were clever enough, fast enough, angry enough to save yourself. The story doesn't have a moral, not a simple one. It has a warning. The world is dangerous. People will hurt you. Trust can be a weapon, and it has a promise. You can survive. You can fight back. You can carry the trauma and still kill the second wolf. Let's talk about the mother. She sends her daughter into danger, alone, knowing the woods are full of wolves. She does it anyway. Why? Because grandmother is sick. Because someone has to go. Because there's no one else. Because sometimes parents have to make impossible choices. How many mothers throughout history have sent their children into danger because there was no other option? Have made the calculation, this is risky, but we have no choice. And when something goes wrong, when the child is hurt, who do we blame? We blame the child for talking to strangers, for leaving the path, and we blame the mother for not protecting better, for sending the child out in the first place. We rarely mention the father. He's away, trading, working, absent. The burden of protection falls on mothers. The burden of risk falls on daughters. And the grandmother, isolated in the woods, because that's where old women end up in these stories. Vulnerable, dependent, 3 generations of women, all vulnerable in different ways, all making impossible choices. And when the wolves come, as they always come, the women save each other. Because no one else will. The huntsman helps. But the revenge, the stones, the watching the wolf die, that's the girl's idea. And the second time, he's not there at all. The story is teaching us not to wait for rescue. It's teaching us to save ourselves and each other. Grandmother and granddaughter working together. Old woman and young woman. Experience and youth. Memory and strength. That's how women have always survived. By warning each other. By teaching each other. By telling stories that say, this is what the world will do to you. This is how you fight back. This story has survived for hundreds of years because it tells a truth we need to hear. The world is dangerous. Predators exist. Trust can be a weapon, but you can survive. You can be wounded and still be strong. You can be prey and become hunter. You can fill the wolf with stones and watch him die. And that's okay. And so the story ends. Not with happily ever after, not with everything resolved neatly, but with truth. Complicated, uncomfortable, necessary truth. This is the story of Little Red Cap, the real one, the one told before we decided that children couldn't handle darkness, before we decided that stories should be safe instead of honest. The girl who trusted the wrong smile and paid for it with trauma and terror and the knowledge that the world is full of teeth. The grandmother who was swallowed alive and survived and became harder, more dangerous. The wolf who thought charm would be enough, who thought prey would stay prey, who died crushed by stones. The second wolf who thought he could try the same trick, who died boiled in water, prepared specifically for him. It's a story about survival, about learning, about what happens when you're hurt, and how you become someone who can't be hurt the same way twice. It's a story about women saving each other, about knowledge passed from grandmother to granddaughter, about solidarity in the face of predation. It's a story about the price of trust, yes, about the cost of kindness in a cruel world, but also about the cost of survival, because Little Red Cap paid a price. She lost her innocence, her trust, her ability to ever feel completely safe. She won, but winning isn't clean. The sanitized version ends with rescue. This version ends with boiling water and dead wolves and 2 women who know exactly what they're capable of. The brothers Grimm collected this story from old women in Germany. Women who had lived through things we can barely imagine. Women who understood that the world was dangerous and children needed to know that. They told this story to warn, to teach, to prepare. This is what predators look like, the story says. This is how they work. This is how they gain your trust and use it against you. But this is how you survive. This is how you fight back. We sanitized it because we thought children couldn't handle it, because we thought the violence was too much, the trauma too real. But maybe we were wrong. Maybe children need to know that predators exist, that they're charming, that they seem safe right up until they're not. Maybe children need to know that it's okay to be angry when someone hurts you, that revenge isn't always wrong, that watching your attacker suffer can feel satisfying even when it also feels terrible. Maybe children need stories that acknowledge the complexity of trauma, that you can survive and still be damaged, that being saved once doesn't mean you're safe forever, that sometimes you have to save yourself, or maybe not. Maybe children should have their innocence. They're safe stories, I don't know. But I know this, the story I just told you has survived for longer than the sanitized version. It meant something to the people who told it, because there are still girls walking through woods, still predators who smile and seem trustworthy, still grandmothers living alone and vulnerable, still wolves, always wolves. But there are also still survivors, still girls who climbed out of darkness and learned to fight back, still women who saved themselves and each other, still red caps bobbing through the forest, marking girls who are visible, who are loved, who are remembered, who refuse to disappear into the dark. The story hasn't ended. It's still being told. Every day, everywhere someone is groomed, attacked, traumatized. Everywhere someone survives. In every kitchen where a grandmother tells her granddaughter, "This is how you boil water. This is how you kill a wolf. This is how you survive. So sleep now. Dream of deep woods and narrow paths. Dream of red caps and sharp teeth and boiling water. Dream of girls who were swallowed and climbed out again, changed but alive. Dream of grandmothers who kept their promises and taught survival. Dream of wolves who died badly, slowly, destroyed by the prey they underestimated. And when you wake, if you wake, remember, the path through the forest is still there. The woods are still dangerous. The wolves are still hungry. But you know how to kill them now. You know that prey can have teeth. You know that survival isn't pretty, but it's possible. You know that you don't have to wait for rescue. The red caps came before you, and they'll come after you. An endless line of girls who refused to disappear, who survived impossible things, who filled wolves with stones and watched them die. The story isn't over. It never will be. Sleep well. And may your dreams be kinder than this story, but no less true, no less.